Everyone, and thank you for your valuable time. I'm really excited to launch this webinar, Sustainable Construction and Deconstruction. Wanted to give you a little background about our mission and what we're working on so that everyone's very clear. My name is Scott Donachie. I'm the CEO and founder of Companies for Zero Waste. We're an organization that brings together everyone that's involved in the waste community. Whether it comes to recycling, when it comes to waste management, when it comes to investors, policymakers, consultants, everyone who's on the front line. And our whole mission here and our vision is to change waste management into resource optimization, and the shift is happening right now. I'm very honored to work with the crew that we have here on this panel discussion today. The discussions will be led by Jessica Marshall, who's the CEO and the founder of Green Mission. She has a background as a CPA and also has a background in appraisals, non-monetary appraisals, works with CEOs, CFOs, and really bridges the gap that we all know is very important for moving towards zero waste goals. And that's bringing in the monetary component, the sustainability component, and really marrying the two. Also, on the call today, we have Travis Blomberg and Dan Hartsig, and they're from WasteCap. They have extensive experience as well in waste mitigation, specific with the construction industry. We also have Larry LaMotte, who is the CEO of ReCapturit. And we have Dave Bennink, who is a leader in deconstruction and has been working in this field, really training and get everyone up and running on the ground. And Dave is going to be joining us as well. So I'm going to start off this meeting right now. We have about half of the attendees in with a poll. So I'd like everyone who's on the call, the attendees, to answer this poll. And then we're going to segue into our first person, which would be Dave Bennink. So I'm going to launch this poll right now. And I'm going to let everyone vote on this. So approximately what percentage does C&D waste contribute to annual landfills? Here's a multiple choice question. And you got about a minute here, guys. So thank you. At 23 or 30, good. I'm just going to do it for 1 minute and then we're going to end the poll. So we got 24 or 32. Okay, excellent. So, okay. So here are the answers right here. 10 people, let's see, 10, 28, 30, and 34. And let's see where most of the votes came in. So it looks like 34 was the majority. What is the correct answer, Jessica? Oh, for some reason, I can't hear you. Hold on 1 second.
The correct answer is 34.
34, okay, excellent.
Yes.
So I'm going to share that results with everybody. Thank you. All right, great. So yes, so if we could segue into Dave right now, that'd be great. Thank you, Jessica.
Great. So Dave Bennink, Building Deconstruction Institute. I have two questions that I want to ask. I'll give you a few minutes to follow up on your thoughts and experience professionally. Number one, what are some of the benefits that building deconstruction and reuse has generated throughout your career? Number two, what are some of the ways that the Reuse Innovation Center can help in these troubled times? Turn it over to you, Dave.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
So, well, the first question as far as the benefits, I think that's what's kept me going 27 years. in this industry. You know, we started thinking that, hey, you know, related to the first poll question, we thought, hey, we can put landfills on a diet. We can do something about that. And then, and we didn't, I don't think we understood what that actually meant back then, what those benefits really are. But yeah, we've diverted over 100 million pounds from the landfill as of today. That's a nice number. It's hard to say what that actually means, but the environmental benefits come in the form of preserving resources, preserving energy. We've preserved history. We've created hundreds of jobs. We've helped tens of thousands of low-income homeowners. So when you start looking at the benefits, you realize that it isn't just environmental, it's also social, you know, and there's a wide range of benefits. But the main thing is that they often come simultaneously. So you're not picking one or the other, you get all of them at the same time, a lot of times. And so what was the second question?
The second question is regarding your Reuse Innovation Center and how it can help during these troubled times, including the global pandemic.
Okay, so one of the things that we've been doing for since 2004 is we've been helping other reuse businesses get started. And we realized our own reuse business, which had at one point had 50 employees and 8 trucks, and you know, it was really going. I just realized that there was a limit, you know, there was a ceiling, and it wasn't sufficient. You know, like I would rather start 100 or 1,000 more reuse businesses, and we could have 100 or 1,000 times the benefit. So we've been helping people all over the country and into Canada, now overseas. And one of the things that there are certain trends or certain similarities between the businesses. They struggle in different ways, but a lot of times they have similar problems. I mean, a lot of times they're not dealing with enough volume. They're trying to pay relatively high expenses relative to their revenue, things like that. So the Reuse Innovation Center is a concept where we have a business cooperative, not a worker cooperative, but a business cooperative where different reuse businesses work together to overcome their problems. They can invest in equipment, they can share expenses, and they can work synergistically. And so we've been looking at these reuse businesses that are struggling. Sometimes they have employees that are getting, not getting paid enough. They're working extra hours. They're having to rely on, excessive tax deductions, things like that. And we were looking for a solution basically to help them out. And then that was what the Reuse Innovation Center became. It became a solution to have them join together and work together. And, we don't have a lot of time to talk about it today, but it is something that I'm always happy to talk to people about the concept because we're looking to start them all over the country.
Great. Thank you, Dave.
All right, great. Dave, I just had a quick question for you. Where are you located right now geographically? What areas are you covering?
Where am I right now? I mean,
yeah, the building reuse. Where are you covered? Is it all 50 states? Is it the Northwest?
Yeah. So before the pandemic, I feel like I would say that I was bouncing around the country every week or month. But I am in Northwest Washington State, and we do, that's where we're based out of. But we're helping people, like I said, in 44 states and 4 provinces right now is our count. Hoping to add other states and provinces and countries and get this going.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So let's go into the next poll before we go into the next Q&A. So I'm going to launch this right now. And one moment. I don't know why I went into question number 1. Let me try this. Hold on. Sorry. Oh, sorry about this, guys. I have a little bit of a hiccup on this poll. I don't know why it's not launching. Hold on. All right, well, let's do this manually, and then people can respond. So the second question is, and I emailed this out to everyone as well, if 538 million tons of C&D waste are recycled, approximately how many acres of landfill space is saved? So once again, if 538 million tons of C&D waste are recycled, how many acres of landfill space is saved? Answer number 1, A is 3,000, B is 4,300, C is 5,200, and D is 6,000 acres. So once again, 3,000, 4,300, 52, or 6,000 acres. So Jessica, did you want to give us the answer, the wonderful answer?
Yes, so the answer to this is that with 538 million tons of C&D waste diverted, that is equivalent to 4,300 acres.
Okay, excellent. All right, and then we'll segue into Travis's discussion and questions. Thank you.
Okay, so we are talking with Travis Blomberg and Dan Hartsig of WasteCap in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And the 2 questions I have for you gentlemen. Number 1, could you please present the highlights of your construction and demolition waste diversion services? And my second question, could you briefly explain how you can assist clients in certifications such as LEED, the Living Building Challenge, STARS, and True Zero?
Yeah, so I'll start by saying WasteCap Resource Solution is an environmental nonprofit, and our whole mission is to provide waste reduction and recycling assistance to the benefit of business and the environment. So the way that we do that is we look at it in 2 different scopes. The first scope being construction and demolition waste. So what the question was asking was, how do we actually assist clients? And Dan is our director of project management who works with these clients on a day-to-day basis. And really what we do is we start the client from beginning to end, starting with a construction, demolition, waste management plan, and the pre-planning and understanding even before your vendors are hired, that we understand how much material is going to be demolished, or in the construction phase, how much leftover material will you have? You know, a lot of times you're demoing a building and you're putting a building back up too, right? So if we can pre-plan and know the exact quantities or have a good estimate, we know to save money on just being able to source separate a lot of that material. I mean, that's the best way we can do that. And making sure it goes to the right places, but also tracking and monitoring and inspecting on a monthly basis throughout the entire project. And then finally, so it's not just you make a pretty report in the beginning or make a pretty plan in the beginning and then you have a report at the end. It's doing everything on a monthly basis and checking in to make sure that when you have some really large hauls that things don't get screwed up, basically what happens in the construction and demolition phase. And Dan, you can probably talk to it a little more.
Sure. So one of the main differences that we see from versus a waste management just providing you their report at the end of the month is we're really looking at predictive analysis and the project schedule, you know, for the types of materials that are coming up. And we find that's really helpful when you're aiming for 75, 85, 90% waste diversion goals, especially on different types of demolition projects. A lot of people who probably aren't as familiar with the industry don't realize the complications with doing different types of construction and demolition projects, and the kinds of waste diversion targets you can really expect to achieve. They might have really high goals, but it may not necessarily be super appropriate to the particular type of project and the materials that are coming out of them. There's a big difference in the market between what is recyclable and what can be recycled. And that second piece, what can be recycled is really very dependent on who is processing that material, who will haul that material, who will separate it, and who will actually reuse it in your region or in your local area. Think a lot of materials that are perfectly recyclable, perfectly reusable, still end up going to landfill if we don't have a market and we don't have an economy based on those materials. So regarding impact, you mentioned impact reporting. One of the new things that have been, or that's been really interesting out there right now is the EPA's WARM model has gotten very complex and has a lot of new data in it. So where we used to just report cost savings, trees saved, landfill space saved, impact on our, how much time that added, your project individually added to the length of the life of a local landfill. Now we can also report reasonably on greenhouse gas emissions saved. We can look at economic impact, dollars saved, hours, increase in labor hours, so jobs created. And we now kind of all wrap that all into our reporting. So we're looking at a much bigger picture, and where we'd really like to see the analysis of waste diversion go in the US is going from where we are right now, which is just how much did we recycle, to how much economic and environmental impact do we actually have. Concrete's really heavy, but maybe the plastics was something we really should have been trying to pursue more if we were going to have a bigger environmental impact. So nice to see that conversation starting. And your last question was about certifications. A lot of the different construction certifications out there look at resource reuse and recycling as one of the key core pillars of a sustainable building design or construction. And so we find ourselves very much involved with the certifications you mentioned: LEED, Green Globes, Green Homes, ideally, sorry.
Living Building Challenge,
Building
and
Challenge.
even universities, they use the STARS reporting. So in that, there's a category for construction and demolition waste. So all these certifications, you plug and play exactly what we do from the construction and demolition side, and they also have an operational component if it's an operation certification. But yeah, so Dan does the same approach, and when it comes to any of those certifications, and we tailor-made each of those solutions for that organization to make sure that they uphold that certification. That's really what it comes down to.
Great. Thanks, Travis and Dan.
Excellent. Thank you.
We proceed with the next.
Yeah, I'm going to launch the next poll. I learned how to do this, so thank you guys for your patience. So here we go. All right. What percentage of CO2 emissions can be attributed to businesses? So we'll give you a minute, guys. Okay, 10 more seconds. Come on, everybody, get your votes in. All right. So here are the results. And what is the correct answer, Jessica?
So speaking to the wide umbrella of all businesses, it is 39% that are attributed to CO2 emissions.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. All right, and we'll segue into the next questions with Larry, please.
Okay, Larry LaMotte, 2 questions for you. Number 1, how did you decide to delve into the problems your new business hopes to address and solve? How does it relate to the topics we've discussed today? And the second question, what are some critical features of your business that will facilitate change in a positive direction? Over to you, Larry.
Now let me unmute Larry. There you go.
There we go. Okay. Well, thank you, Scott and Jessica. I really appreciate being here, and it's great being with all of you today. So thanks.
Thank you.
That first question of how did I decide to delve into this problem? Well, 4 years ago, I decided to do a personal career reinvention, excuse me. I wanted to do something bigger and more than I'd ever done in my life before. something that frankly scared me. And it needed to embrace my strengths and my passions and would have a good financial potential, but it needed to do something really good for the world. So I took my architecture background, my experience in construction and facilities management, remodel work, and my startup experience, and I rolled it all into one, and it became a business called ReCapturit. And ReCapturit is an online marketplace. It's a two-sided online marketplace built specifically to amplify the flow of used building materials into new construction. It's part of the, it's part of the whole circle of the circular economy. So your second question was critical features of the business. Well, I saw in my research at the beginning of this that e-commerce was virtually non-existent across the entire industry of architectural salvage and used building materials. It's a big problem. It's got a lot of moving parts, and many had tried to solve it. Many individual companies, many individuals, some companies specifically trying to do that, but it wasn't getting done. So we sought to solve and provide a central place for sellers of salvage, as I like to call them, for sellers of salvage to display, to sell, and to ship their products to anywhere in the country, but to minimize that shipment for its impact. And then another one is we, like I said, are exclusively a marketplace for recaptured building materials, nothing else. So that means that people go here to look for what you guys, what the sellers of salvage have. And another factor is that buyers can now buy from multiple sellers in a single transaction, and that's a huge thing for bigger projects, because they can buy not only where they can drive, but they can buy regionally and even nationally if they want to, and from multiple locations. And then the last point, if I may, addresses the whole COVID-19 pandemic, and what we are finding to be a silver lining is that e-commerce is a safer way to sell for sellers of salvage. They don't have to have that much interaction directly with their customers. And eventually, what we're hearing from some of the sellers is that they will appreciate the fact that we'll be able to overcome the traditional retail problem of high real estate costs, high overhead. By being in major cities, they can now be out in the Tules and sell salvage and at a much lower overhead. So those are some key advantages.
Thank you, Larry. Okay, we will move now to roundtable discussion. So the way that we'll structure this is I'm going to pose a question, and I'll start with Travis and Dan, and then I welcome Dave and Larry to jump in and make this a great discussion. So Travis and Dan, based on your experience, what materials do you believe are the largest fillers of landfill each year, and who is most responsible for these deposits? Travis, we'll start with you.
Dan, I mean, you probably have the report, the Wisconsin report, right in front of you. So do you want to take that away?
Yeah, so what we see from a construction side, going into landfills, the concrete and masonry, brick and block, those are tending to get diverted. Metals definitely get diverted. So from if you're looking in the box, right, in the landfill box on a project, the large quantity of material we see going into landfills from a construction or from a demolition site, for that matter, tends to be the plastics, woods, drywall, for the most part. And with the wide variety of plastics, obviously there's a significant volume there, but we also see cardboard going into the dumpsters, unfortunately, in a lot of cases. The biggest thing with wood and drywall, some of these very recyclable materials, is that once you paint it, stain it, seal it, glue it, once you treat it in any way, the end producers who want to take that material and reuse it in a new product, they don't want these unknown contaminants in their materials, so they won't take painted, stained, sealed, glued wood, things like that, drywall, demolition drywall. We're very, very slowly starting to see processes adopted in the US to start taking those materials and actually reusing them. Processes that are used in Europe and in Canada aren't used here, though, still, because of a lot of litigation and fear over the types of contaminants that might show up, even though proven technologies can remove them.
And Dave, can you jump in here? So you have a lot of on-the-job, firsthand knowledge of what you're salvaging and what makes it most often into the reuse market. Can you give us a little insight on what you are seeing salvaged and what you could potentially see a higher level of salvage, reuse, recycling?
As far as what's being salvaged?
What's being salvaged, you're seeing on the job site, as well as what you think could be salvaged at a higher level with maybe perhaps better technology, better knowledge, education?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. I agree that we're not seeing as much concrete going in the landfill because people are not wanting to pay for that, a high expense. We are seeing a lot of wood because these buildings that we're generally dealing with are wood frame structures. So their highest component is wood. So that's the biggest input and the biggest output as far as what's being salvaged. Our whole industry is, really significant amount of it revolves around wood being saved. And I think that one of the things that is not well understood is the ability for us to save concrete. And when I say that, I'm kind of referring to a couple hundred projects that we've done where we took the entire building down and left the foundation behind for the foundation to be reused in place. And so when we think of what's being kept out of the landfill, that's actually a significant factor to consider because it's a huge amount of embodied carbon. It's a huge avoidance of energy and resources, by saving those things. So, but I also wanted to, say that I agree that when things are laminated together, when they're glued together, glued down spray foam insulation, it really is sending a lot of things unnecessarily to the landfill because we just can't get them apart.
Now, Larry, if I can move to you, looking at the e-commerce side of these salvage materials, how is this accomplished in a cost-feasible way that's not prohibitively expensive?
Good question. So a lot of sellers are already displaying materials online, but the key factor that they've not actually solved is shipping. And And often when you're an individual or a small company, you don't get many breaks. You know, the big companies get the breaks on shipping and such. So that was the biggest hurdle that we overcame first. And we built in, actually, we have 4 different ways to accommodate that. You can pick it up at the store. You can do parcel, larger things. It's called LTL, less than truckload. And then what we affectionately refer to as big and bulky, which is, you know, think grand piano or something. So, so we do get better shipping rates overall for that because we have scale, we have magnitude that the individual company wouldn't have. So that's one aspect of it. We've also found that with a wider audience, you have a much greater ability to get a better markup on things, and it can still even be a regional sale. But with a lot more eyeballs than say the 20 to 100 or even 200 people that go into a salvage store these days, you can get a lot more people looking at it and buying it, and quite frankly now feeling safer about it. So markup is a factor. The shipping is a factor. And frankly, because we're brand new, we have to adjust the dials as we get rolling and find out where cost savings can be found. And it probably won't be in bundling up a box of, say, hollow core doors that have paint on them and are damaged. It's probably not going to be in that world. But with a combination of what we call the cherry-picked items, the really attractive things, beautiful ornamental things and mantelpieces and stained glass and things like that, architectural ornamentation, those items can have a significantly higher markup and thus help for those lower markup products that are going to get shipped too. So there's a balance, and we're looking to help our sellers find that balance. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that's fantastic. Yes,
Okay.
I'm always looking at the cost. How is this affordable?
Right.
Okay, so I'm throwing this to Dave. What is your impression of how salvage materials are currently being processed, prepared for reuse, and collected from multiple sources to provide sufficient quantities for new construction use or resale? So how do we get enough, like what Larry's talking about, how do we get enough to actually construct a new building out of reused materials without picking and choosing and having to piece together from 5 or 6 sources? So Dave, what do you see in your deconstruction work? What is your impression of how we're doing towards getting to this goal?
Well, that's a good question. That's part of the Reuse Innovation Center's purpose, is to join together multiple companies into one source, you know, and in this case, it might be one brick and mortar source, or it might be an online source. But one of the challenges we've had since day one was we would have a large quantity of material and we would have no one waiting for that material. Other times we'd have a demand for material and we couldn't find the supply. And then thirdly, you know, we would find a supply of something and then someone would demand more of that material than we could provide. Maybe they needed 50,000 square feet of flooring. We only had 10,000 square feet of flooring. So, you know, that's why we're pushing the Reuse Innovation Center concept, because it's really a way of networking people, not just having them share expenses, but share opportunities as well, and share inventory. And I think the online platform that Larry has is a great way to do that. You know, in the end, we're not specifically looking to provide all the materials to build a single building. We're hoping that all buildings will have reclaimed content in them, and so therefore they may be able to deal with smaller quantities of one individual item. And you know, you might save 500 square feet of a certain type of paneling, and you hope that someone needs 500 square feet, not 600, because you just don't have any more of it. And and it has a unique look to it and that sort of thing. So I think part of it is what we're trying to do, but I think part of it is what our designers trying to do to work with these materials. If we can meet somewhere in the middle, I think is our goal.
And what I've really enjoyed learning from you, Dave, is looking at integrating these networks nationwide. When we look in the Bay Area where storage costs are astronomical, Travis and Dan, where you are in the upper Midwest, I'm interested for your take on this, of the accumulation of potential materials for reuse, outside of the Milwaukee area, a little further north, and you're in a sparsely populated area. How do we reach those areas of the country and encourage reuse in design and building when they're not a big city hub?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, in the Milwaukee area, in the greater Milwaukee area, we're fortunate to have some very old historic homes still, where all these homes haven't been demolished. So even within the greater Milwaukee area and then outside of Milwaukee in Wisconsin, you still have older homes. And a lot of these, when you salvage these materials, they're great for remodeling projects because they're looking for a certain fit and style to make everything work. So that's a great thing for the salvage industry. But likewise, like Dave was saying, when we operated a salvage reuse warehouse for several years, we had design build firms were a big buyer of our materials, and it's always dealing with the quantity. But also like the bars and restaurants. So you have to really look at the owners of what's the end market for it and where's this material going. So to get something into the rural areas or less populated areas, you're going to have an old historic home typically, or you're going to have to design for your new construction, introducing reclaimed elements, as Dave mentioned, whether it's a mantelpiece or whether it's more an artistic architectural salvage type, component to it, or stained glass windows. That's what I would see. And Dan, you're an architect, so you could probably answer this question better.
And Dave actually hit the nail on the head. If you limit your market to simply the niche decorative elements within a space, and you're starting with an owner and a designer who upfront has an idea of what they want to go for, and they can go to a market, they can go to either a website or they can go to a warehouse, and they can secure those materials ahead of time. That's what's necessary in order to get most reuse materials back into new buildings. In order to upscale to volume, and to really get into mass reuse of material, we need volume and consistency of product. You need to be able to go to a Home Depot version of a reuse store and walk in there and say, I want to be able to buy 300,000 square feet of carpet, or I want to be able to buy 300,000 square feet of flooring. I want to buy 1,000 8-foot 2x4 studs, without that, and then any structural member is going to have to be able to pass structural tests and standards. A segment of our population is obviously rapidly moving towards the most economical construction practices possible, and economical construction means pre-designed, cut, factory kind of setup where you can just drop the same thing over and over again, right? Like cookie cutter homes, right? They talk about ticky-tacky homes back in the 1930s, but in order to get to the bigger market and to really start reusing materials, we have to develop a system of grading and making consistent, large quantities of consistent material, so that someone can just say, well, I'm going to build a house and it's going to use recycled or reuse studs or something like that, and not have to buy all that material ahead of time and spend all that time ahead of time before the project's even built to secure those materials in order to use them in their project.
Thank you. That leads exactly into the next question that I want to start off with Larry. So talking about the designing for circularity and designing to deconstruct, this is such an important concept in all of our industries where we need to have the circularity in mind at the inception. Larry, what can you discuss with us about the potential for this circularity being in the foreground before a project commences?
So I'd like to play off of what Dan just said, because he said some absolutely essential elements to the growth and the further implementation of a circular economy. And I won't speak to the construction of the part of the circle that involves the construction of building components, which Dan mentioned a bit, but I will talk about the salvage aspect of it here. And what he also said. And what in my research I found was that most of salvage materials are being utilized in residential and small scale commercial. And even when we hear that, oh, well, it's in the brand new, lovely regional hotel, I always kind of wonder and think, well, you know what? Where? In the bar and in the lobby? And a friend in the industry calls those cameo rolls. So it's not a large percentage of the overall construction. It's cameo rolls. It's glimpses of it in high visibility areas. So what Dan was also talking about is, and I would say, is supply chain. That's where we have to change, because he said we need to develop that basically the supply chain of materials out of salvage and into new construction requires some changes, and it requires working with the construction industry to actually, what I call, merge into their supply chains. And that there also ought to be merging into what he also mentioned was Home Depot and Lowe's. I've told people all over the world, we're going to see aisles in Home Depot and Lowe's of neatly packaged reused materials for sale right there in retail. And we're looking at the years ahead. We need to, as an industry, establish trust in the availability, in the quantity, in the timing of the movement of salvage materials into new construction, which is a big leap. It's a lot of different steps, a lot of moving parts, but it'll happen because it's inevitable. So we're looking forward to working with the construction industry to, like I say, merge, to assert ourselves, to assert this stuff, not disrupt, not, leave them by the, as roadkill by the side of the information superhighway, but to find ways into their existing supply chains and bring these materials all together from multiple sources all around the country at the timing it needs and the quantity it needs, and establish that trust so that architects, designers, landscapers, speculative builders, they can all trust that those things can be there in the timing and the amounts that they need with the quality they need.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the work that Dave is doing as well with the Reuse Innovation Center, that's a critical conduit to that supply.
Absolutely.
And Travis and Dan and discussing how we can work on the carrot measures to get people to the table with the star rating, the living building challenge. We need the carrot and the stick. Okay, last question that I want to throw out. I want to start with Travis and Dan before we go to some questions from our audience. So we're talking about governmental programs and public policies. So which work to drive sustainable construction practices? What are the factors that have contributed to the programs working? And when did they not work because of the public policy? So what works and what does not work when it comes to public policy, where we are right now in 2020?
I think for me, it has to be, you have to incentivize every single stakeholder that's being affected by this. So we're lucky enough that the state of Wisconsin, for all of their owned buildings and all of their assets that they own, for $5 million project or more, they must report on their construction and demolition practices. And that's something we've assisted them with and helped them out. And that's a really good program initiative because they have to take that, they have to put the flag, or they have to draw the line in the sand and say, we're going to make this commitment. And we expect this, and we're doing this on behalf of the taxpayers too, because ultimately it's going to reduce the cost for landfill or for disposable materials and rather than recycling. So when there's a clear benefit, it makes perfect sense to do it. It's a little more difficult with deconstruction ordinances in that because municipalities and cities can't really get that tax break as a private homeowner can. I've seen those initiatives, vary in different degrees. So, I mean, that's all I'll say to that. But Dave can probably talk more about that.
Yeah.
Jessica, real quick, I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm trying to do this. I have Paul Muir, who's the mayor of Bethlehem, New Jersey.
Oh, great.
Hey, Paul, you there?
I'm here. I just
Excellent. Not to put you on the spot. This is kind of like,
So I saw my screen change and I was wondering what was going on.
I'm going to throw him in here. So Paul's wonderful. Introduction. He is the mayor of Bethlehem, New Jersey.
Mayor Emeritus. I'm on the board committee, so I served for 7 years, 10 years on the committee.
Yeah, so I just wanted to give, he's going to give a little bit of a background of what he does with historical preservation and really spearheading reuse and historical projects in the New Jersey area. Just wanted, from a policymaker side, if you could give us like a 3-minute background on what you're doing in New Jersey and potentially like how we can contribute and you can contribute with moving this agenda forward. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the panel's been wonderful listening to the perspectives. And Larry, I was checking out your site as we were going through this. I also grew up and still am involved in the metals recycling business. So since my family started in the 30s, so very familiar with the process and the recycling world. But I'm the executive director of the Red Mill Museum Village in Clinton, New Jersey, and I'm on the board of Preservation New Jersey, so it's an advocacy group for historic preservation. And so I really come at it from a perspective of what historic preservation does for the community aspect, but have been spending more time with Scott and researching, of course, the environmental and recycling impacts of historic preservation also, and looking at the values of keeping those construction materials out of the waste stream or reusing them, and then also even looking at the value of, everybody says that new construction materials save on energy, but if you look at the process to construct, to ship, to move, a lot of times it takes many years to recoup that savings if you can reuse what's there for those historic sites. So Preservation New Jersey, my push when I joined the board was very passionate about the community impact, and I think the environmental impact combined with the cultural impact of preserving and rebuilding these historic communities, historic neighborhoods, especially in the urban centers, is really an invaluable resource for them.
Great, thank you. Thank you. So we're going to go into some questions here, and I just have one question that came up, and due to time constraints, I really appreciate everyone's valuable time. We have a question. My opinion for all the panelists, we need to learn how to integrate reclaimed and new materials so it doesn't become a binary decision of I'll only buy reclaimed if you have all of what I need. Can any of the panelists speak about where they see it happening? Not really sure. Is that clear?
How about
So
Dave?
I didn't understand the question.
So this would be somebody claiming that they're not going to build with reclaimed materials because they don't have the full quantity available in reclaimed. So they say it's all or nothing. I'm either going to build with everything reclaimed or forget it. I'm going to Home Depot to get everything new. If I understand correctly, Scott, that's the gist of that question.
Yeah, right now we need to be in a hybrid model of partial reuse, but still a huge portion of construction comes from new materials. We also need better answers to address the quality of materials and be able to assure they are to code. Yeah, so these are some questions that have come out. Just wondering, so it's like not a binary decision, but I would even add to this question and kind of piggyback on top of this, how do we educate the consumers and how do we educate the public And how do we get the shift over to repurpose and reuse materials versus new materials? Like, it does seem like it's, you know, and I'll just throw that out, whoever wants to answer that first, you know. Yeah.
From the Reuse Innovation Center, the innovation part for us, a lot of it revolves around creating products that are acceptable for new construction. So we plan to do a lot of processing of materials, remilling of wood and things like that to make it more acceptable, you know, more in line with what you would expect from new materials, clean and organized and uniform and things like that. But really, you know, there's still limitations on, we can't just call the factory and say, we need more of this. We are only generating what people are essentially throwing away. And so we're working cooperatively with new construction, with designers, with manufacturers, to say that, you know, their products need to be designed in such a way that they can be disassembled. They're designed in such a way that they can be reused. And then we're going to see a shift where materials are saved and because they were meant to be saved. The adage is, if you design waste into a structure, you're going to get waste out of a structure. So we've been fighting against that, and in the future, we hope that that will change. I think that after doing so many buildings, I've learned a lot about design for disassembly just by chance, you know, where someone constructed a building and it was easy to take apart, and we learned from that, and we want to pass those lessons on to designers and architects, so that future buildings will be easier to take apart and there'll be more materials available to repurpose.
That leads really well into a question that we have from the fabulous Melissa Wenzel, one of my favorite people in the reuse industry. She's in Minneapolis. And Melissa, your question, oh, it just disappeared on here, but this feeds into what you were saying, Dave. I believe what she was asking is, how do we move this model from purely a nonprofit model of reuse yards to a for-profit model? How do you see that transition happening? And then Larry and Travis and Dan jump in as needed.
We're already moving it. We've been helping for-profits do this for years. You know, basically the model is that you get paid to take the building apart, and then you get paid when you sell the materials. So you're getting paid twice. Simultaneous to that, you're avoiding a lot of the expenses of demolition via, landfilling material, which is getting more and more expensive. So, and then the final component for for-profits is that they work really efficiently. So it's common for us to take a 2,000 square foot house down in 3 days. And so the labor isn't as high. We can generate those materials. Now, we may have to pull the nails after 3 days, but a lot of the expenses and the time in a construction schedule isn't such a huge impact. So I think that more than half of the businesses I'm helping are for-profits. I would say I trained all of the contractors in Portland, Oregon for the Portland Deconstruction Ordinance there. It was probably 15, and they're all, I think 14 of them are for-profits and one is a nonprofit, something to that effect. So we're already moving in that direction. It's part of the sustainability model is that this isn't something that's subsidized. This isn't something that's limited. This isn't something that is a token effort. This is something that's mainstream.
Absolutely. And so staying with my favorite Minneapolis contingent, Olivia Eshman, she is from Hennepin County, and they actually have enacted a deconstruction grant of $5,000. And they not only enacted this right before COVID hit, but they've had some success with that program through the pandemic. So Olivia asks, and I think this would be a great question for Larry to start this out. What implications could large-scale commercial reclaimed material sales have on local reuse businesses? For example, deconstructed lumber sold at Home Depot. How can the industry address in order to support local reuse centers? And this is right up your alley, Larry. This is some of what you're doing in your e-commerce and looking at the supply chain and matching it up with demand. So, for you, Larry.
So, Jessica, I apologize, but you kind of dropped off at the first part of the question, so I'm so sorry, but I didn't catch that all.
So, large-scale commercial reclaimed material sales, that saving those commercial reclaimed materials, how can that have an effect on local reuse businesses? And the example would be deconstructed lumber sold at Home Depot. So how can the industry address in order to support local reuse centers? How do you see that model working where all levels of trade and business are relevant in this market?
Okay, thank you. Thanks for repeating that. So I'm going to point at Dave a little on this one, because what they're doing is a great thing for this cause, and that innovation aspect. Some of the innovations that we're seeing, particularly for what you're asking here, Jessica, about the large scale projects being taken apart, deconstructed, and then how can that benefit the implementation in new construction eventually? What is that path? If I'm rephrasing your question right. Okay. So the accumulation of those materials is one of the aspects that is going to be growing here very soon because of what all of you and all of we are doing. But we're at that point in the graph where it's sort of that early adopter stage in all that we're doing. There's going to be a lot of change coming out of our COVID world, and happily it's good change. And one of them is what Dave's organization is doing. We're envisioning a similar thing, and we're calling them transformation distribution centers, where you bring in massive amounts out in the Tules again, low real estate costs, low overhead. You bring in massive amounts of materials like a trash recycling does to sort it, to productize it, to bundle it, to palletize it, and to distribute it out. It might actually go out to actual existing salvage sellers. It might go directly into new construction and so forth. But that's going to be something that's needed, is that larger scale productization, cleaning up, pulling nails, getting mortar off of things and making them sellable in a low overhead setting, knowing that there is going to be on the demand side, the demand for those materials. So that's part of that trust factor I touched on before, is once we get the supply chains working and the trust built, we can move out of that residential and small scale commercial realm that products are going into now and into full scale commercial projects as a reasonable percentage of the total building materials that are going into it. So all those factors, I think what Dave's doing is a brilliant thing. And all those factors are going to start being enhanced by virtue of what they're doing, what we're doing, what you're all doing. And I'm happy to say that I believe that this is just that point in the graph where we're just turning that corner and it's about to really start making.
I have a question. Sorry to interrupt, Larry. We're just getting a little tight on time.
Yep.
I have one more question here, and thank you so much for your input. This is from Jay Bissett from the EPA Region 4, and this is for all the panelists. There's a significant move on carbon sequestration state policies and efforts regarding new end markets for forestry products as part of financing carbon offsets. Are there opportunities for reuse industry in being part of this growing finance model? What role would opportunity zone incentives have in seeding and supporting this model with impact investors? Anybody? Sounds like a good one.
We're looking at an opportunity zone project in Portland, Oregon, And I'm not saying I fully understand it yet, but I think that when we look at the investor potential, one of the things that we think we have to offer is that multitude of benefits that all happen simultaneously that I mentioned earlier. So depending on, it actually doesn't really matter what their focus is or what they find important. I think we can provide the benefits necessary. If they want social equity, if they want environmental benefits, whatever they want to associate themselves with and invest in, we have those benefits that we can point to. And as far, our only concern with that is in the scale, providing enough impact for their dollars, or but really that's what we're looking for right now is someone investing in us maybe just in the form of providing us space. And that's one of the things about why can't we be a Home Depot? If we had an affordable space, we could collect the materials necessary to have a high volume and provide people large quantities. It's just so that's where we're hoping. And we also are very well adapted to helping the unemployed in these opportunity zones and through our workforce development efforts.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Well, we're going to wrap this up. I want to thank everyone for their valuable time. Please I sent over an email earlier today with my email address. If any of the attendees have any specific questions for the panelists, please reach out to me. It's a long email address, sdonachie@companiesforzerowaste.com, but I emailed everyone. We're also going to be focusing on doing these waste events. I don't even like the word waste. I like resource optimization. I don't know if you ever saw the movie Men in Black when they go and they erase the people's memory, but that's what I'd like to do to every single person on this call right now is erase your memory and start fresh, because I do feel this is a very underserved part of the market. But we're going to be focusing in the future on massive potential problems with cobalt, lithium, battery production, infrastructure issues, scarcity in water. These are all, I think we've learned with the plastic crisis, and just in New Jersey where I live, we have over 400 dormant landfills. We had a very good call with Jigger Shaw a few weeks ago. The average footprint in the New York City and New Jersey area has gone from 200 miles to 700 miles in moving waste. And those numbers are just daunting to me. We can do better than this. And I think by bringing in all of the leaders that we have and not operating in silos to end this, when we have the policymakers, the investors, the frontline people like everyone on this panel, and we're not working in silos, is really where we can create a lot of momentum and move things forward. And we can change the view of this being a cost structure to being a resource center of driving greater profitability, especially with a lot of these municipalities running in the red right now. So thank you everyone for your time. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions, please call me. And Jessica, did you want to add anything? Jessica is our leading sponsor and she's been helping me for the last year. I just wanted to thank her very much for all of her support. And everyone else on the call, thank you very much for your valuable time during this, challenging times. So. All right, thank you, everyone. And a recorded version will be sent out in the next 48 hours to everyone on this call. And I look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you very much. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.